We had walked through the Valley of the Winds at Kata Tjuta and been to Uluru. In fact, we'd even climbed it back when it was the thing to do. But we had never managed to get near that flat-top mountain, often mistaken for Uluru, Mount Connor, also known as Attila. While staying on Curtin Springs cattle station, on which Mount Connor is situated, we planned to go out to the mount with a commercial tour company, but we were disappointed to find that no tours were available at the time we were there. So, resigned to the fact that we weren't going out to Mount Connor, we decided to take advantage of the hospitality and quirky sense of humour that Curtin Springs had to offer. That evening, while chatting to another couple over a meal, I happened to mention about Mount Connor and our disappointment at not being able to get out there. Tim explained that they had flown into Curtin Springs on their way to Darwin to join an air race in support of the Royal Flying Doctor Service, and that we could fly out over Mount Connor in the morning, if we liked. Well, we did like and couldn't believe our luck. The next morning, we were driven out to the bush airstrip and introduced to Tim and Marguerite's 1966 Mooney M20F Executive. After the daily inspection and checks, we were soon airborne and looking down on the huge pastoral lease. Curtin Springs, a family-owned station, is over 1 million acres in size and runs over 4,000 head of cattle. As we flew closer to the mount, we could see its true shape, rather bent like a banana. It was nothing like Uluru or Kata Tjuta, with its flattish top being covered with green vegetation. In geological terms, it is a classic example of an insel berg, created by the erosion of the surrounding strata. The Mesa, or tabletop mountain, is about 5 kilometres long by 4 kilometres wide, and stands about 250 metres above the surrounding plains. After our unexpected flight with Tim and Marguerite, we were back on the Lassiter Highway and heading for Marree on the Stuart Highway in South Australia. Heading south for the border, the skies began to darken. By the time we had set up in the campground at the Marree Roadhouse, it was blowing a gale. It was to be an inside kitchen that night. As we had power, we could set up the portable induction cooktops. The next morning, with the weather fine again, we were back on the dirt as we started our adventure along the Oodnadatta Track. The first 200 odd kilometres to Oodnadatta is featureless cattle station property. The first thing you notice when you drive into Oodnadatta is the standout pink roadhouse. As well as fuel being available, the store is well stocked, including many four-wheel drive emergency items, as well as something to cool you down on a hot day. The Oodnadatta Track now followed the southern section of the old Ghan Railway that went from Port Augusta to Alice Springs. The railway arrived at Oodnadatta in 1891, but it wasn't until 1929, 38 years later, that the line was extended to Alice Springs. The old railway station is now set up as a museum. The old Ghan Railway closed in 1980, but many relics still remain. One of the more spectacular relics is the Altapakina Bridge over the Niels River. In 1889, a tender was called for the construction and delivery of ironwork for the superstructure of the bridge, with the contract going to the Lion Foundry in South Australia. It was eventually completed and opened for traffic in 1892. Its total length is 588 metres. The substantial bridge was built to replace a surface level railway on a causeway, which was frequently washed away by floods. Oodnadatta has its pink roadhouse, whereas William Creek has its, well, everything is painted white. Trevor Wright, who owns all the property in William Creek, has often been seen with a paintbrush or roller in his hand. White. He has also been quoted as saying that William Creek must be the only town in Australia with more aircraft than people. Trevor's company, Wright's Air, operates scenic and charter flights out over Lake Eyre to the Anna Creek Painter Hills and beyond. As well as accommodation in this historic hotel, there are self-contained units, a camping ground, restaurant, and fuel is available. And there's always the quirky side. If you are happy to camp with no facilities, but would like to soak up the atmosphere of the old Ghan Railway, Beresford siding is one of a few options. Beresford is on private property, Anna Creek Station in fact, the largest cattle station in the world, over 7 times the size of the largest ranch in Texas. Further southeast, the Oodnadatta Track enters the Wabma-Kadabu Mound Springs Conservation Park. Within the park is the Curtin Springs siding and campground with facilities. It has restored buildings from the railway era, a couple of heritage-listed stone-lined wells and engine inspection pit, a draw-card thermal pool, and a campground with shade. Also in the conservation park are some Mound springs that are worth a visit. The track out to the springs passes through an extensive gypsum lake area. The Mound springs are created from water deep from within the artesian basin, which filters to the surface, forming mounds and bubbling ponds. Adjacent to the Mound spring, Blanche Cup, is Wabma Kadabu, also known as Mount Hamilton. Another spring is called the Bubbler, for obvious reasons. Kurnimerka is another old railway siding worth a stop. The Fettler's cottage is still in reasonable condition, as efforts to restore it were made in the 1980s. Beside the disintegrating water tank used to top up the steam engines is a desalination plant, which was used to soften the heavily mineralised bore water that played havoc with the steam loco boilers. We found that if we followed the old track beyond the tank and tower, we would eventually come to the Stewart Creek Bridge. The long plate girder bridge is an impressive 433 metres long. The creek is named after the explorer John McDouall Stewart. He passed through here in 1858 during a south to north crossing of Australia. A shimmering white horizon indicated we were nearing the southern reaches of Lake Eyre South. This viewing point is actually several metres below sea level. The alignment of the old railway can be seen even closer to the shores of the lake than the road. When Lake Eyre flooded in 1950 and later in 1955, there was complete disruption of rail traffic. The Oodnadatta Track is full of surprises, and one of those is seeing two aircraft sticking up out of the ground on their tails. This area near Elberry Creek is known as Mewtonia, and its many sculptures are the work of Victorian Robin Mewtoyd Cook. From Plainhenge, it is approximately 50 kilometres to the bakery at Marree. Unfortunately, we were too late for the famous pasties and had to settle for one of the bakery's famous pies instead. Marree was particularly significant to the Ghan Railway as it became a dual-gauge junction station, with standard and narrow gauge coming up from Port Augusta and narrow gauge continuing on to Alice Springs. This caused untold inconvenience to freight and passengers for about 30 years, until the new standard gauge to Alice Springs was opened in 1980. The new Ghan line now completely bypasses Marree. Marree is also the junction of the eastern end of the Oodnadatta Track and the southern end of the Birdsville Track. In our next episode, we follow the old Ghan rail line to Farina, a ghost town that comes alive. From there, we head to Inaminka and the Burke and Wills Dig Tree on Cooper Creek.